Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 p.m., and so we will get started with this afternoon's presentation. My name is Dr. Charles Lucius Perry, and I'm a native Floridian, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I am currently the chair of the Business and Entrepreneurship Department. I have placed my email as well as my telephone number on this slide for you to send me questions, comments, critiques. I'm always open to critique. As I was explaining to one of my colleagues before we got started, iron sharpens iron. So I don't learn the most of what I know from textbooks. I learn the most of what I know from my students and from my peers. So feel free to give me information. This conversation that we're going to have today is really motivated by an experience that I had this past summer as I was serving as an acting chair for our business and entrepreneurship department. Uh, as you may very well know, we have been trying to, the college that is, been trying to launch eval kit. However, that process was interrupted during the spring, and we did not have it launched as we had anticipated. Instead, during the summer, there were several courses that engaged in, if you will, a pilot run of the Enval kit. I was teaching 4 courses at the time, and when I started the summer out, that's all I was doing, just teaching 4 courses. Then the opportunity came for me to serve as chair of our department, which is a very dynamic department. And on top of that, as you very well know, we had transitioned from face-to-face delivery to online delivery, both in an asynchronous mode as well as a synchronous mode. What I found myself in was a situation of being a jack of all trades and a master at none. I'm revealing myself to you today. I'm making myself vulnerable. I'm exposing myself to tell you that I found myself just as these cartoons are depicting. I was all over the place. So I would like to talk about my experience that I experienced this past summer while teaching 4 classes and while being subject to the pilot run of the eval kit. Now, do note that before the spring, before we had the automated eval kit, which is placed in Blackboard and made available to all students, we, at least for the business and entrepreneurship department, one of our current retirees, Mr. Gaston McNeil, would make appointments to go to various classrooms with pencil and paper in hand to administer the student evaluation. Well, no longer is that the case. We now have it electronic, and it can also be found in Blackboard. So what I would like to do is to tell you about my situation this past summer and take a look at some of the resulting data that resulted from my classes and to just share a moment with you about what I discovered. One of the things that we will cover today is to uh, underscore how well do you know whether your student academic needs are being met before the end of the semester. And why do we need a workshop such as this that aims to turn bad data into good data? Yes, I'm confessing that some of the data that I'm going to share with you today was not only a disappointment to me, but a disappointment to um, a disappointment to me in ways you'll never know. So let's take a look at bad data. What are the pitfalls of bad data? What are the pathways to good data? And lastly, what are my next steps? And of course, I invite you to help me determine what those next steps are. So one of the things that I thought would be necessary is to take a look at how this information that we're sharing today could impact our pedagogy. You know, how getting to know our students better could improve not only course outcomes, but student teacher outcomes as well. So to look at the situation, that because I was feeling bad, I talked to my dean about it. I talked to the associate dean about it. And then when the opportunity came about for a call for presentations, I thought to myself, hmm, why not become the type of scientist who self-administers either a serum or a vaccine to cure ill? And I said, why not? So I said I use myself as an experiment. So to do that, I needed to take a look at, well, how do I typically approach things and what is it that I need to do to maybe enhance the way I approach things? Typically, this may ring true with many of you. On the first day, our conversations with students would go something like this. We will talk about the course syllabus. We will go over the textbook with the chapters, highlighting the learning objectives from the chapters. We would encourage students to not only review the learning objectives in the front of the chapter, but also to take a look at some of the discussion questions and summaries at the end of the chapter. We go over our assignment instructions, making sure that students are aware of the key touch points in our course. We take a look at the desired outcomes of each assignment, study the rubrics with the students, encouraging students to build relationships with the librarian and the writing center, and we began to develop a relationship with uh, students and encourage them also to develop trusted relationships with a peer, someone else in their classroom. Well, as a result of this particular study and examination, I am going to add some additional stuff to my first day. I'm going to get into a little bit more uh, technique to learn more about my students. I want to know a little bit more about their cultural heritage, their goals beyond academic goals, their aspirations, their fears, perhaps do a micro, quick popcorn type SWOT, that's strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat activity, just as a teaser, if you will, for the first day to get us moving around. To promote office hours as a great icebreaker and coaching opportunity. And something different to create norms and expectation based on evaluation variables. Aha, here's where the secret sauce begins. Now, there's a story behind the data. I dug into the data for 4 classes that I administered over the summer. I had a population of roughly 75 students over those 4 classes. And as the data would show, that my class was one of several sessions within the BMT Business Management 1010. And one of the things that I'm able to take a look at is how well did I do against the mean for other professors who was teaching the same course in other sections. So one of the outcomes of this particular discussion is perhaps to have you to take a look at your pedagogy and see how you can enhance your pedagogy to become a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more pluralistic, and a little bit more inclusive. So to begin with, I want to take a look at some data that dealt with this issue. I reached out to Dr. Doss. I said, Dr. Doss, I experienced this situation during the summer. Really feeling bad about it. I talked to my dean about it, the associate dean about it. Do you have any information that you could share with me to at least point me in the right direction to develop this conversation with you today? So Dr. Doss shared a couple of articles with me. I'd like to share some highlights with you based on what I discovered concerning the role of student evaluations. Student evaluation of teacher effectiveness, is linked to promotion and tenure. This is what a group of researchers named Marsh and Rausch communicated in 1992. They also, Hussein and Khan indicated that student feedback is considered as the most effective and reliable method of teachers' evaluation. Did you get that? Student feedback is considered as the most effective and reliable method of teachers' evaluation. Hussein and Khan also said that the majority of teachers evaluated uh, did agree with the feedback system. They also agreed that it sensitized them to their blind areas. And that's good. We should be sensitized to our blind areas. That's very important. Hussein and Khan went on to say that student feedback is an effective tool for teachers' evaluation, resulting in faculty development. So for our discussion today, we're going to take a look at a working definition of this dilemma that I find myself in, dragged down by the bad data. So what is bad data? I define bad data as student evaluation data that are lower in ratings than the average benchmark data for the course, the discipline, or the department. For example, as I indicated to you, we had 260 students in our Introduction to Business course over the summer. This is a fast-paced 10-week period of time that students go uh, through 20 chapters in order to learn the many dynamics of business. Pardon me while I have a drink of water. So that's our working definition of bad data. Now, I would like to show you 15 variables. When I took a look at these variables, again, I was very disappointed. However, I see that as a beginning point for healing, a beginning point for, all right, how can I improve my pedagogy? How can I improve my cultural diversity to reach out to the various students who are coming to us for direction and for education and enlightenment? So there were 15 variables. The variables that I'm going to focus in on for today's discussion will be those that I have highlighted in yellow, not the ones that are in green. The ones in green I call them feel goods, but they're hardcore items that, are standard. Uh, what I wanted to get to, how could I make a difference, with the diverse population that I serve? In business, 1010, Introduction to Business, we have all sorts of students. We have high school students, we have returning students, we have students who have graduated and then transition to either receive a certificate or to transfer on to a four-year institution. And so the eval kit is set up that every class, and be ready for this in case you haven't yet tuned into the fact that each course that is being conducted during fall 2020 will be subject to an eval kit. Your students will receive notice that an eval kit is in Blackboard, and you are encouraged to direct students to that particular site, and that's an important thing to do. It is very important that you let students know that the evaluation is there so you can direct them to that particular site. Now, I'm not suggesting that you use any type of incentives or any type of encouragement such as that. I will leave that up to you, but I do encourage you to promote this evaluation. One of the major pitfalls that I discovered in the not the instrument itself, but the process is, it's a very engaged process that requires attention, which means that you will have to promote it. You will have to encourage students to go to the site and to complete it. And I say that to say that oftentimes the people who do complete the data uh, would provide information to you that is very useful, and you can get additional useful information if more people actually complete the evaluation. But let's take a look at one that popped up at me. Demonstrated interest and enthusiasm. We had, out of my 75 students, I had 32 to respond. I ended up with a 3.49. The department benchmark for the course was 4.22. Here's another one, clear expectations. Uh, 32 out of 75, 3.25, benchmark for the course, 260, 4.12. This was the lowest one here. I said, gee whiz, what did I need to do differently to explain to students better using multiple communication means, speaking to a younger generation, oftentimes teenagers, oftentimes people who have various cultural heritage. And one of the other thing that I discovered is that, the age differentials, you really need to be sensitive to those and use terms that a younger generation, a diverse population are likely to understand. And it's okay to have folks to give you new language as well. You'll be surprised how it may improve your repertoire of language skills. Assignments and activities help me to understand and learn. 3.57 versus a 4.31. Here's another green variable, text value that's important resource. Here again is a hard tangible, the syllabus, the textbook, highlights of the course. Another area that caused concern, assignments graded and feedback provided in a timely manner. 3.56 versus 4.29. And this is a situation where maybe a week is still too long. This is a situation where in a microwave generation that we may have, students are expecting a good response to their assignments anywhere from 48 hours to 72 hours after an essay or the like has been turned in. Instructor provided useful comments about tests and assignments, 3.86 out of 4.04. Again, those are at least 5 of the items I want to just hone in on and examine as things that I could do during fall 2020 to turn that data around, knowing very well at the end of November, beginning of December, I will be measured again with a different population, but did I improve? Remember, I gave you the premise at the beginning, a jack of all trades, a master at none. In the beginning, during the summer, working as chair, working as a professor, and taking the SRT/OE prep course. Those of you who engage in that process know that was a very intense process. I found myself walking a tightrope. I found myself being an authoritarian. I found myself sticking to the script. I found myself being a strict constructionist when it came to course requirements and course interpretations. However, what the people needed was less rigidness, but more flexibility and also more, if you will, empathy. And you will see how empathy plays a significant role in making these changes that are needed to be made. So I continued to research some of the data to find out, well, if I do nothing about this bad data, what could possibly happen? You know, and one thing I discovered is that we have to check this bad data either through introspection or through inspection in order to become aware that there's a difference between what you are doing and the standard that is expected of you. It could also lead, if left unchecked, to insensitivity and ineptitude, and that can become a habit. Anxiety can set in due to fear of negative feedback and difficulty, to organize, well, what's all this saying to me, into any coherent, helpful structure. Research also suggests that fear can influence teachers to lower their standards or raise grades. So equipped with that, I was convinced that I needed to do something to turn that data around and to at least be equal to or greater than the department standard. Some additional pitfalls of bad data, according to Lindahl and Unger, are fear to open emails, open letters. Well, I don't have that experience, but this issue of demoralization, sometimes let's admit it, sometimes words hurt. And sometimes things that students may say hurt. And it may even make you anger. But we have to rise above it in order to get a grip on what direction we need to go in to meet the needs of the students, not just one student, but all of the students. Bad data can also create conditions for teacher disengagement. And Lord knows we don't want any teacher to be disengaged from their work, their students, or their destiny. We also Trend, for example, suggests that bad data can foster disconnectedness, not only disengagement, but just disconnectedness. Like we're in two different worlds, and we definitely don't need that within the student teacher relationship. So, having said all of that, we're now faced with, well, what direction do I go? Which way leads to success? What road is less traveled? Oftentimes, people take the easy way out. But in a situation like that, like this, that requires so much cognition, that requires so much thought, that requires so much employment of all of the motivation theories that I know of or that I could study, which way should I go? Well, this self-awareness enabled me to really do a self-examination of myself and to decide on, well, what's the first step? Lindahl and Unger suggests one of the first things we need to do is to embrace the student as consumer. Oh, wow, the student as consumer. The student as consumer suggests that the student has needs that must be met, just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that type of mechanism to understand what students may need. The research also suggests that we need to create critical engagement strategies where student and teacher interact, where we can get to know one another better, not just from a student teacher perspective, but also from just a scholar perspective, understanding a piece of material that we are studying and be able to enter into adult to adult dialogue about that information or person to person dialogue about that information. Using teacher evaluations as targeted training opportunity. So what I have done, I've taken my bad data and I've turned it over into a training opportunity that would be self-policed. I'm sharing it with my dean. That's important that you share information with others around you because you do need a support system. No person is an island. But using teacher evaluation, remember the premise that I shared with you in the beginning, is one of the most effective ways to measure teacher effectiveness. So use teacher evaluations as targeted training opportunities, particularly as relates to cultural strategies that would enable us to serve our diverse populations. So I'm going to present to you three strategies that I am undertaking, and I am undertaking them simultaneously. I am undertaking them sequentially, but you can bet your bottom dollar I am definitely undertaking them. Strategy A assumes the position that we should seek first to understand other cultures before requiring others to understand my culture. I need to understand the students and I need to understand them well. I need to aim for pluralism as above to monotheism. It's not about one person. It's not about, one dominant thought. So I need to hear more about if you will, the background and the culture of the students from day one, not by accident along the way, but definitely from day one, from the very beginning, building those culturally respectful relationships from the beginning to allow space within the classroom for a student to share their heritage. I taught at Prince George's Community College from 1987 to 2002 after I retired from the Air Force. Then I became a full-time management consultant traveling throughout 40 of the 48 continuous United States, working with on federal government projects, working with community groups and the like. When I left Prince George's Community College the first time in 2002, I pretty much could identify the cultural groupings that we had at the time. When I came back to Prince George's Community College in 2019, the diversity had expanded. They had expanded. And languages that were being spoken, perhaps greater than the languages that we list on our website. And names that I had never pronounced before, I now found myself learning how to speak those names. And so those things need to, I found useful starting at the beginning of the semester, as opposed to allowing it to be just happenstance and occur at some other time during the semester. Embrace interculturality, mutual understanding of differences, particularly with people with different background. And so that's what the research data suggests. And so here I want to show you a picture of, Rodriguez's viewpoint and his pedagogy. The way to improve your pedagogy, according to Rodriguez, is to, the knowledge of the cultural beliefs, the historical relationships that people come to the classroom with, making space for that perhaps on the first day and maybe some other times when you are, particularly if your lessons allow that. Skills, interpreting, relating, discovering, particularly when it comes to clarity, reinterpreting, speaking in more than one manner, in addition to using words, maybe using some pictures to help those interpretations become clear. And never get tired, if we particularly embrace the student as consumer, never get tired of answering questions. Never even give the appearance of being tired to ask questions. Allow the questions to be asked, and you will find out that you will discover new things not only about yourself, but about the students themselves. Attitudes. And you will find something that will run consistent across these three approaches that I'm sharing with you today. Empathy. Empathy. Dr. Rayleigh, when I first met him in January of 2019, that was one of the first concepts that I recall him sharing with us in a faculty meeting. And that issue of empathy is genuine, is real. And yes, you can be scholarly and have empathy at the same time. There's this myth that the two can't coexist, but they can coexist. Empathy can coexist with scholarship. That's important. Being open, sharing, even if it's a bit risky. Readiness, that suggests doing the homework, being knowledgeable, coming to class ready, being curious, curious about new ideas that students would suggest in the classroom, and allowing cultural expressiveness as opposed to perhaps condoning it or condemning it. I'm sorry, not, I used the wrong word, condemning it. This is the word that I was choosing from. So here's another researcher, Kidwell. Kidwell, he suggests that we look at three types of pedagogy: pedagogy of information, pedagogy of preparation, and a pedagogy of encounter. And let me show you a picture of that. So here again, these all intersect, and so Kidwell suggests that if we look at the student as consumer, then we're concerned about the features, the advantages, and the benefits of what we are sharing with the consumer. We value cultural differences. We recognize our roles as educators, that we are key conduits in the information that's being transferred. We're, so if we look at the Pygmalion effect, that we want students to achieve, that we want students to be their best, then those are the type of conduits, those are the type of messages that we have to always keep out there, that we expect for them to achieve. We expect for them to do well in class. Preparation, viewing culture dimensions as a skill set, helping students with their social cultural development, particularly if, for whatever reason, they may be the first generation or second generation citizen here in the United States. And so we play a very important role in the social cultural development of students as well. And while we may not want to embrace that, we may not want to embrace how much of a caretaking role of sorts that we have when it comes to our students, but in a sense, it's just that when we are helping them with their social cultural development in particular. I know, for example, showing people, for example, how to engage in interviews or how to write a research paper or how to make an oral presentation. There's a lot of social cultural development that goes into those three acts in and of themselves. Ability to interact well with others. That's an art as well as a science. And then the encounter. You know, the encounter is not viewed in Kidwell's sense as something that is uh, competitive, but instead it is a technique that involves empathy, tolerance, perspective. Oh yes, I have a granddaughter. I have five grandchildren. Two of them are teenagers, and I tell you, I oftentimes reflect if I was ever anything like they are, then I gave my grandparents sweats, because my grandchildren now are giving me sweats, and what I'm really learning is tolerance. You know, and so with a lot of differences when it comes to cultural differences, whether it's occupational differences, whether it's gender differences, whether it's educational differences, whether it's racial or ethnic differences, tolerance is important. And perspective, being able to share perspectives, share worldviews in a pluralistic way, in a collective way, working together as teams, being aware. And I oftentimes will ask folks, about, you know, your teammates, to be supportive of your teammates. And if your teammates need help, be willing to share some help with your teammates. Something different I saw here that I often found myself doing in community settings, particularly working with professionals in professional settings, is the issue of group norms. So one of the things that I'm thinking of is how do we turn the eval kit variables into group norms? So we could have both a 360-degree partnership in working toward not only achieving the course outcomes, but in achieving great diversity outcomes as well, with among our peers. So, in summary, I just want to share with you as we take a look at the pedagogy of encounter, it takes an intercultural approach with affection. Oh, think about that. That means we have to feel. Yes, have to feel. In other words, show some feelings with our students for sure. Having that perspective, nature of expectation, uh, sharing cultural heritage. I know I've said that before, but I want to restate that once again to allow some time for that to occur at the beginning of your semester, at significant touch points in your semester, maybe after the midterm, maybe again coaching right before the final examination. The third strategy, and this is the last strategy that we're going to discuss as we move toward the conclusion of this presentation. Here we have a researcher named Tran. Tran suggests that we should examine people-to-people connections and people-to-people empathy. Here again, we see that word empathy. That's a powerful piece there. We also see the word connectedness, though it was mentioned in different ways earlier by Marsh and Kidwell. Here, Tran suggests that we create productive connectiveness, make it count. Our relationships with our students should end to the plus side, each time we connect with them, even if it's just one new word that's learned or one new sentence that's improved. So we treat students as partners in the educational process. Be in sync, first and foremost. If you don't take a look at the Prince George's Community College, the key performance indicators, it's always good to take a look at those several times during the semester also to ensure that what you're doing in the classroom has purpose, that is transformative, and that it connects with the whole institution approach to student achievement and student learning. So Tran suggests 6 principles, and I'd like to share those principles with you. Now, these principles, they're almost like management theories. You know, if you study management theories long enough, you know that they all point, you know, to similar directions. You're either people oriented or task oriented or a combination thereof. And we find the same thing here when it comes to improving our pedagogy. Empathy continues to be one of the driving forces. But Tran adds some additional things. Now, if you are into conflict resolution, you may think that accommodating is a losing proposition, but here, accommodating is a winning proposition because we are accommodating the needs of the students. We're making those connections, you know, looking for ways to make connections, helping students make connections between the learning objectives and the course objectives. That's key. Reciprocating, you know, let's face it, we're not all perfect. And if, you know, we need to reciprocate, we reciprocate. You know, acknowledge your mistakes whenever you have mistakes. Integrate, you know, integrate students' feedback that they give you in class into the text materials that you have where appropriate and where fitting. Relationalizing. And that is the art of building relationship. That's where affection comes back into play. I'm not asking that you go over heads over heel with this, but to relate, to connect with students where they are, that becomes an important pursuit. So, what are my next steps? Having gone through the research, having taken a look at the data, you know, I'm pretty convinced that, gee, I can come up with a strategy to help me in those five most desperate areas where I need some self help, if you will. So I've taken a look at the three types of strategies that were presented by the researchers, and I've come up with a grid. I developed a table where on the left side we have the 15 evaluation items that we are measured on, and then I combine two of the theories, strategy A and strategy B, uh, to then use that as a matrix, create a matrix where I could see what kind of strategies can I come up with to improve my data. So I took the first one, demonstrated interest and enthusiasm. You know, looking at the science, the art and science of building relationships, you know, emblems of success, you know, helping students to connect with success that they are experiencing in the classroom, helping students to discover new things not only about themselves in a cognitive way, but also uh, just exploring new things in the discipline that they're studying, how to relate to each other, as opposed to being an island, even in the internet environment. I do encourage my students to create social chats among themselves to work on various assignments as a group. Being able to reciprocate, you know, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. The way that works in class is if I read your research paper, you know, will you read mine? You know, we can make critiques on each other's research paper and we can help each other where we're missing the mark or not connecting with all of the goals in class. So as you can see, as this particular matrix suggests, or this table suggests, that I have worked through some strategies for myself to improve my data as relates to demonstrated interest and enthusiasm. I've done the same thing for the clear explanations, assignments, and activities that I will use to help students learn, and the other two variables as well. So I worked through what my responses are going to be during the semester and for the rest of the semester. So I'm anxious to see the results of this treatment, you know, to those areas as a result of the evaluation that will come out perhaps in late November, December. I get the feedback for those class. I'm teaching only one class this time uh, as chair. You're only permitted to teach one class. So, but that one class does give me an opportunity to examine how well I performed during the semester, particularly honing in on these five. Now, next semester, I will hone in on the next set of variables that I didn't do well on the summer evaluation. And again, I'm thankful that the summer evaluation was a pilot. It gave us an opportunity to identify our weaknesses before things go official this particular semester. And so one of the things that I'm interested in is to improve my cultural competence and to deal with the various students who come to my class to get top-notch premium education, scholarly education. And so to do that, uh, the things that I know that I need to do include to take a look at the back. And if you don't do that, here's where Stephen Covey comes into play here. He suggests that we begin with the end in mind. I do encourage that you study the 16 evaluation variables before, during, and after each semester, just so you remain sensitive to your cognition, the things that you need to be in tune with as you're working and relating and interacting with students from various backgrounds and with various interests. And these reviews will serve as an affirmation. And in the terms of B.F. Skinner, in the noted psychologist in operant conditioning, this way you can actually coach yourself into better performance by taking a look at these variables, taking a look at the data, and closing the gap between the bad data and the department benchmark. And that's very important to bear in mind. So you use this information and knowledge to get to know your students early in the semester and build that awareness throughout the term. It is okay to learn about students' cultural heritage. Create some space there. And just by building that type of relationship with students, you make better connections with students and the historical relationships, in terms of uh, their academic pursuits and maybe some of the cultural icons from their perspective. I learned a lot of the modern day music and art, just engaging in conversations with young people. And they turn me on to the terms and concepts that I need to be aware of. So don't run from bad data, but instead face the data to interpret, relate, and discover skills that are critical, for you to encounter and blend differences needed for improvement. Become more self-aware and practice openness, sharing. You know, I was open enough to share with my dean, look, I fell on the sword. I messed up. I had too much on my plate over the summer, and this is the outcome of having too much on your plate. But I am going to correct it. I recognized that I needed to make those corrections. And I had empathy, not only for the students, but the data that they presented. And so in the state of readiness, you look at ways that you can improve, and that becomes your own self-operant conditioning process at work. As we conclude this presentation, I would like to just echo again to embrace the student as a consumer. This metaphor will sensitize you to student needs and how to work on achieving and meeting student needs. I always like to fall back on Maslow's hierarchy of need. It's one way that you can do a quick check-in, with folks to see where they are. Teachers are positive conduits. Know that, embrace that you are a positive conduit, and you can create those positive interactions that students need for the social cultural development. Encounter yourself and others to improve your cultural competence. Look at your data. None of us are perfect. So I do encourage all of us to bear that in mind for sure. Pardon me, my didn't realize that my computer power cord had kicked off. So take a look at looking at tools. Notice I use a table, to outline the evaluation variables, and then I bump that up against theory. When we make this particular presentation public, feel free to take it and use a similar tool. Take a look at your data, and put it to your advantage. Use it to your advantage to create productive connectedness with your students. And I do expect a great difference in the data the next time around with our student eval. So develop a toolbox for yourself. Those are the things that become important to you. Here are the references that I use for this presentation, and I look forward to hearing from you again. My email.
Dr. Perry,
Ma'am?
before you wave at us and disappear, there is a question in the chat. Someone
Yes.
wants to know, how do you implement the SWOT analysis activity in the classroom? So just before you close your magic toolbox, we'd like to have an answer to that question.
Certainly. I generally use a 2x2 table, where I would use strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, and ask the students, based on what you know about yourself, what are your strong areas? What are your weak areas? What is it that you hope would never happen to you? And what is it that you hope that you can aspire to do? And I would do this if I was in Blackboard, for example, or in the classroom. I would draw it on a whiteboard, and I would put the 2x2 frames on the board, and just have students to popcorn out the thought processes. And then we would see whatever would emerge from the input. And then we would conduct interpretations and make some summations based on that. So that's how we would use it. I see some great faces on here.
So Dr. Felicia is saying, is the evaluation toolkit available or required for all courses?
To my understanding, it is. It's going to be embedded in every course, which again is a great thing. And so students will receive an email, but it is super dependent upon the professor to market that evaluation is out there. I think one of the key things that became my Achilles heel was that only had a 42% response rate. And if I could use Pareto's principle as a threshold, I need to aim for 80%, success rate in order to get that, in my opinion, substantive data. But I am going to take the bad data that I did receive and use it as training opportunities for my self-development. And I'm anxious about that. I want to definitely address those areas where the students say I need to improve, and I want to work on that.
So we have about 9 minutes left.
Yes.
And Dr. Helstorks, I believe, is saying, I would like to make a request, recommendation, and a challenge.
Is that possible?
We have about 9 minutes left. So I wouldn't take up the entire 9 minutes, but I would give it.
No, I won't.
Okay.
I promise. I will try to do this in 60 seconds or less.
Okay.
In terms of Dr. Perry, that was just absolutely outstanding. And
Yes,
I really appreciated the presentation for many reasons. The request is that I would like for you to critique something that we wrote, my colleagues in psychology and I. We sent it to Dr. Rayleigh for his review. It was an inclusive syllabus template. We sent it yesterday. And so I would like for you to give some input to that, because I already see that some things are missing. And so I certainly would value your opinion on that. The recommendation is that you have some way to kind of help us synthesize this incredible presentation, not only for us as teachers, but also I teach educational psychology for future teachers. And I would like to use some of this information, with your permission, in some sort of modular way. And then the challenge is that, since you are a researcher, and I like to do research as well, I would like for us to engage in some scholarship of teaching and learning around some of this, and to start publishing in this area and become national leaders, as I know Dr. Williams would want us to be, so we can tell the story of what we're doing here at Prince George's Community College. You've made me so proud, I'm almost moved to tears. A, as a psychologist, because you've used so much of the psychological knowledge, and B, because of the way in which you presented this in such an authentic way, and talking really about the need to be empathetic and to care about our students, which is something that I have carried in my heart forever. Thank you.
You bring me to tears. I'm trying to hold them back over here. I appreciate those comments.
Deserved.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments.
Well deserved accolades. So here's what I'm reading now. Dr. Williams is also saying, this provides a great opportunity for peer-to-peer engagement around the use of the data obtained through the evaluative process. Is this being considered?
Well, I don't know. It was through my pain and through my sharing with my dean, Barbara Denman, and then the call from Dr. Davis for workshop topics that, you know, the thought came, why not use myself as an experiment, you know, to work through this pain and to do better, you know. And so because I am a researcher, I needed to see what the data said about it first. And that's where Dr. Doss was uh, generous enough to share a few scholarly articles. And then I went to our library, something I always ask my students to do. And I was able to, you know, track down some additional articles on the topic. And so it was through that that helped me, you know, really create therapy in a sense as to how do I pick myself up from the ashes, if you will, and work with the students that I have this term and improve. And I can see the difference. I can see the difference. Definitely.
So we also, Dr. Robinson is saying, I would like that this presentation be a part of an employee orientation for new adjuncts teaching on the credit side. And just earlier, someone said, and also on the continuing education side, this should also be included. So I just ad-libbed that piece, but I thought it was important to put those two things together. And then also you'll notice, Dr. Perry, in the chat, you have several of your colleagues thanking you for a great presentation.
Well, thank you so much.
And you still have 5 minutes.
Well, may I say that this information is available to anyone? You know, I just want to make sure that I present a scholarly presentation, that it wasn't based on hyperbole or just feelings, but instead, you know, research. And then to just, it's important to take a look, as Stephen Covey says, you know, to take a look at the end, you know, what the goals are, and create strategies to work toward those goals. And the data that I received during the summer definitely helped me set goals for myself that coincides with the institutional goals, but definitely, and that goes to say that you have to kind of take your change into your own hands, so to speak, as opposed to waiting for extrinsic motivators to move you into action. And that's where, if you care, you'll do that, right? Because oftentimes, who's the first person to know that they're messed up? You are. And so, but if you care, you know, you would intrinsically move that needle before the extrinsic motivators kick into gear. At least that's how I look at it. I think I was so eager for this presentation. I've been practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing that maybe I spoke too fast.
No, you just have us pondering so much.
Yes,
well, I'm just going to speak for me. You have me pondering so much. So, Dr. Perry, just in responding to your last thought, part of the time that I was sitting here listening, particularly to the latter part of your comments, and you're describing the pain, it also made me wonder how many people would look at that data and not experience pain, would think it was the students and not see it as something that was related to their particular practice. So it makes me curious about the need for both the sort of individual and the systemic awakening around the expectations for student success. Because I imagine that there are some, I'm not going to, pontificate about what the percentage might be, that the data would not have been problematic for them. Right?
Yes, and, you're right.
Yes, the data wouldn't have bothered them at all. They would not have been in pain. That's my greater pain. I'm not concerned about you because you experience pain. Systemically, I must turn my attention to the fact that many people, that didn't bother them, right? Or that they place the point of emphasis still on the student and the deficits that our students may have versus looking at it holistically. So I'm interested in how we might, in fact, evoke systemic types of responses in addition to this ethic of care that we need to raise a greater consciousness around. And I know we don't have time to talk about it. I'm just leaving thoughts because I'm deep in pondering, you know, as I have listened to the information, but, you know, systemically to say what must be our response under the circumstances that don't allow, in other words, people to opt in or out, but that everybody's in until we see the level of outcomes that we consider to be acceptable. Right? How do we get to the
Well
place of
stated.
normalizing that you don't get to choose to deal with it, but it is the standard. It is the expectation from the very beginning. So I'm interested. I invite everybody in this session, you know, to think, you know, to think with us along those lines. I'm completely inspired here, and I believe in the power of one, but I want to work from both ends, right? From the all and from the you. So that we can get to those holistic systemic outcomes that are so important to us.
And I have to give a shout out to, I believe her name is Anderstein Robinson.
Robinson, yes.
30-day challenge.
Yes.
Yes, because I have been journaling along the way. And because again, that data bothered me. And so I was journaling along the way, trying to, you know, put salve on my, if you will, emotional injury.
Yeah.
And that was helpful to journal. And I sent her a copy of the presentation this morning with a note that her activities helped me shape the presentation up, and I appreciated that. Yeah, that was good. And then I think Clover Brown, Dr. Clover Brown is working on a special initiative as well. And I'm a part of that group working with her. And I shared this presentation with her as well. So again, it was all from the data that Dr. Doss shared with me that got me thinking, you know, how can we improve this data, in particular for individual professors such as myself, who may have cases of bad data, you know, and for one, don't run away from it, but to go straight through it. You know, don't try to go around it, don't run away from it, but deal with it, Well, that ends our presentation for the day. It is 1 minute over, actually. So thank you so much for chiming in. Thank you so much for your comments. And again, my email is perrycl@pgcc.edu. My telephone number is 301-546-0198. You know, call me, email me. I share this information with you. And there was many articles I didn't even use because it would have taken me over my time. You know, but by all means, I'm more than willing to share what I know with you, right? I appreciate that. So have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Perry.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.